Hello, greetings, and welcome again to another whiskey review, another blended Scotch whiskey review. This time we're looking at the Famous Grouse, Smoky Black. Yeah, it's somewhat of a common Scotch. It's easy to get, relatively accessible, and relatively good price point. So, they changed the bottle in the last few years. It used to be Famous Grouse Black. Now it's Smoky Black. A lot of people compare this with Johnny Walker Black for some reason. We'll get into that a little later on. Let's do a little nosing and tasting of this blended Scotch whiskey. Well, immediately what you get on the nose is a real musky flavor or note. Very musky. It's almost like it reminds me of the old burlap bags that had grain in them. That had grain in them for a year or two, then you emptied the grain out, and then the burlap bags got rained on, and you picked it up and smelled it. That's what the initial impression of this whiskey is. Damp, ex-wheat probably, burlap bags. My impression. And they call it Smoky Black, and there is a little bit of wood smoke in there. Kind of ashy, but there is a little bit of wood smoke. I almost get some sort of acidy type constituent in there. Hey, maybe it was acid rain. That was funny. Anyway, speaking of rain and damp and grain, you do get somewhat of a significant amount of grain whiskey in this. I don't know what the proportion is. I'm assuming it's like an industry standard for blended Scotch whiskey, which is like a 60-40, 40% malts and 60% grains. Now, one of the primary malts in here is Glenturret, because this comes from the Glenturret distillery, and you can taste traces of that in here. But anyway, that was the nose. Let's have a taste. Campfire smoke. It's that smoke, campfire smoke, but also like dried fruits, dried red fruits. A bit of tangerine, the caramel, vanilla. So leaning toward ex-bourbon barrels, but also that dried red fruit would lean more toward ex-sherry cask. So it's a blended Scotch whiskey, so you never know what they've blended together in there, but it does have traces of both. It's also traces of butterscotch. A fairly decent butterscotch. There's like overtones of an anise flavor, licorice. And that's all supported and underlined by instant coffee. At least that's what I'm getting. It's like an instant coffee, butterscotch, anise, licorice, caramel. smoky, tangerine-y, dried red fruity type palate. Now on the finish, let's give it another go for the finish. Now the finish is quite interesting, if you want to call it that. It has a marine type finish. The finish on it reminds me of, you got the smoke there, but it's more like a smoked kipper or mackerel, something like that. Some sort of freshwater fish in the finish. But there is a mild smoke there. The most smoke you get is on the palate. You do get a decent amount on the nose, but most of it's on the palate, and on the finish the smoke decreases, but you get this very watery, fishy, smoked kippery type note. It's interesting. I wouldn't say it was a simple profile. I can see why lots of people buy this. However, talking about people comparing this with Johnnie Walker Black Label, of which I'm not really a fan of myself, but I don't get this the association, because Johnnie Walker Black Label and this, even though they're black in label and name and color, really, caramel coloring, chill filtering, same as Johnnie Walker Black, the flavor profile is completely and totally different. The Johnnie Walker Black has more of what I describe as a silky type feel on the palate, and that comes from the Clinus distillery with their real waxy whiskey that they're known for producing. They produce, and that's one of the main constituents in Johnnie Walker Black, and so it gives it that silky, waxy type feel on the tongue. This doesn't have that at all. This is completely the opposite. This is a very, very dry whiskey. Very dry. It's not unpleasant. Let's see what a few drops of water will do for this. This whiskey doesn't produce many legs at all, and the ones that do run straight down, and at the top you do get some beading. Now there's a lot more smoke that comes out on the nose when you add water, a lot more. The hickory smoke. Now they say this is a peated whiskey. I don't really pick up the peat so much as I pick up the smoke, but as far as the phenol levels, the parts per million of phenols would only be, I think, between 5 to 8, if that. That's just my guess. It's not a heavily peated whiskey, so if you're looking for peated whiskey, even though it says peat on the front of it, you really have to search to find it. But there's a decent amount of smoke once you add the water. And once you add the water, it dissipates that musky, that initial musky smell that you have. Okay. Yeah, a few drops of water definitely improves this whiskey, because now on the palate you're getting a slight hint of medicinal taste. Almost now is when you're tasting a hint toward that Isla peat, that Isla profile. But once you add the water, you are getting a slight medicinal note that's quite pleasant if you like that sort of whiskey. I do. The campfire smoke is still there. Yeah, I mean, a lot more medicinal notes once you add the water. The vanilla now is almost not there. The caramel's there a little. The dried red fruits are a little bit more enhanced than they were before adding the water. That licoricey type anise flavor that was there on the palate before has severely decreased. The butterscotchiness is about the same. It's about the same, but it's a nice butterscotch. Let's try again for the finish. Now once you add the water to this, it gets rid of a lot of that smoked mackerel and fishy type on the finish, that fishy type flavor, those notes, which they were a little bit unpleasant. They're still there, but they're severely decreased. And it's almost like they're being taken over by the smoke. There is that typical Highland type smoke profile that you get. You get that on the finish. You get that pretty much. That's basically the smoke that I get in this whiskey. This is one that I would definitely sit down, pour a dram, add water, and enjoy it. Without water, it's a little bit brutal. It can be. But, you know, everybody's tastes are different. I'm just explaining to you my taste on this. Anyway, the price point is a wee bit high, I think, for a blended Scotch whiskey. This runs about $32 to $36 dollars, pounds, or euros, depending on where you're at. You can get nicer, smoky, blended scotches for a lot less than that I find's better. Teachers, for one, comes to mind. Isle of Mist, White Horse. But the three I just mentioned are relatively inaccessible depending on where you're at. This one you're going to find any and everywhere. So, marks out of 100. I would give this, for its profile, after adding the water, just all around, I would probably give this a solid, it would be an 85. I was teetering between 84 and 85. It would definitely be an 81 before the water. But I mean, just the general profile, I'd stick with an 85 on this whiskey. So, let me know what you think in your comments below. I'd love to hear. And that's it for this review. And until next time, this is Tom signing off. Bye-bye.